Imagine you are standing at the edge of a fjord. It is the year 892. The water in front of you is black, not dark blue, not deep gray, black, the way water looks when it has no bottom you can trust and no shore you can see. You are about to climb onto a wooden ship 60 feet long. The planks beneath your feet are less than an inch thick. Between you and the ocean floor, nothing but oak and pine tar. You have no compass. The compass will not reach Scandinavia for another 200 years. You have no map. Not because maps haven't been invented, but because the ocean ahead of you has never been drawn. No one has ever come back with measurements precise enough to put on parchment. You have no landmarks. From the moment you leave this fjord, every visual reference you have ever trusted will disappear within hours. After that, 360 degrees of open water. Every direction identical. Every wave looking exactly like the last. You have 30 men behind you. They have wives, children, farms waiting for them. And you are the one responsible for getting them home. This is not a hypothetical. This happened. Thousands of times. Viking crews made this crossing. Norway to Iceland, Iceland to Greenland, Greenland to the coast of North America. So routinely that the sagas describe it the way you might describe a long road trip. Difficult, sometimes dangerous, but expected to succeed. Modern historians spent decades trying to explain how. What they found was not what anyone expected. Before we talk about how they navigated, you need to feel what they were navigating through. The North Atlantic is not the Mediterranean. It is not a warm, calm, relatively enclosed sea where you can island hop your way across and never lose sight of land. Ancient Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, they built their entire naval culture on a body of water you can cross in stages. Safety always within reach. The North Atlantic is something else entirely. The average wave height between Iceland and Greenland in autumn is between 12 and 18 feet. Not during storms, on an ordinary day. During a storm, those waves can reach 40, 50, 60 feet. Walls of water moving faster than a man can run. These waves carry enough force to flip a modern cargo vessel. The water temperature hovers between 34 and 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Fall into it, and you have minutes before your muscles stop responding. Your hands go first. You cannot grip a rope, cannot pull yourself back aboard. Then your core, then your mind, then nothing. Fog is the constant companion of the North Atlantic crossing. Not the thin morning mist that burns off by midday. Thick directional erasing, horizon-swallowing fog that can last for days at a stretch. When fog sits over open ocean, you cannot see the sun. You cannot see the stars. You are, in the most complete sense, blind. And then there is the sky. At 60 degrees north latitude, the sky behaves in ways that break every assumption. In summer, the sun never fully sets. It circles the horizon in a low arc, casting long amber shadows at midnight, making it nearly impossible to read direction from shadow angle alone. In winter, the sun barely rises. 4 hours of gray light, then darkness. This is the environment Viking navigators chose to master. Not conquer, master. Because the North Atlantic follows rules, systems, and over generations, Norse sailors learned to read every single one of them. So here is the question that kept historians awake for most of the 20th century. The Norse sagas describe voyages across the North Atlantic in enough detail to be taken seriously as historical records. Leif Erikson's route to Vinland. Eric the Red's settlement of Greenland. The regular trade runs between Norway, Iceland, and the Greenland colonies that operated for nearly 400 years. These are not legends. These are documented crossings. Confirmed by archaeology, the Norse settlement at L'Anseau Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, excavated in 1960, proved that Vikings reached North America approximately 500 years before Columbus. But for decades, the question of how they navigated remained genuinely unanswered. Because when researchers looked at what Vikings actually carried on their ships, the archaeological record from shipwrecks, the inventories described in sagas, the tools recovered from Norse sites, They found almost nothing that resembled navigational instruments. No compass. Confirmed. The magnetic compass arrived in Scandinavia around 1100 AD, after the main era of Atlantic exploration was already over. No sextant. The sextant wasn't invented until 1731. No astrolabe. Arabic and European astronomers developed the astrolabe, but Norse sailors show no evidence of using one. What they did find was more interesting. In the Icelandic sagas, particularly the old navigational texts, there are repeated references to a mysterious object called a solarstein, a sunstone. The sagas describe it being used in overcast conditions, in fog, even when the sun itself was completely invisible. A navigator would hold it up, look through it at the sky, and somehow determine exactly where the sun was. For most of the 20th century, historians assumed this was mythology, a literary device, a romantic exaggeration of something that didn't really exist. Then, in 2013, everything changed. In 2013, a team of researchers at the University of Rennes published a study in the Proceedings of the Royal Society. They had been testing a specific type of mineral, Iceland spar, a naturally occurring, transparent form of calcite found throughout Scandinavia and Iceland. Cheap, common, easy to find. When you hold Iceland spar up to the sky and rotate it slowly, something remarkable happens. The crystal creates a double image, two slightly overlapping pictures of whatever you are looking at. When you find the rotation angle where both images are exactly matched, you are pointing the crystal directly at the sun's position, even through complete cloud cover, even in dense fog, even at twilight, when the sun is below the horizon. The accuracy of Iceland spar navigation is within roughly 2 to 3 degrees, sufficient to cross the North Atlantic and land near your target. A fragment of Iceland spar was recovered from a 16th century English shipwreck in the English Channel, the same year as the Rennes study. This was an English ship using a Viking technique 500 years after the Viking Age had ended. The sunstone was real, it worked, but the sunstone was only the beginning. Whales and birds, the living compass. Seeing a whale was data. It told you which current you were in, which direction it ran, and your relation to ocean basins. Birds were even more precise. A navigator who spotted a gannet knew land was within 50 miles. Puffins, within 30 miles. When lost in fog, the navigator would release a raven. Ravens, unlike seabirds, head directly for land. The raven's flight was the direction of shore. Ocean current reading. Viking navigators learned to read these, running a hand through the water and feeling the temperature difference. Following the color change where cold Arctic water meets warmer Atlantic flow. Knowing the current told you your latitude and bearing. On clear nights, Viking navigators used the North Star. More sophisticated techniques used constellations rising and setting at known positions. A wooden disc with notches used to track the sun's arc. Several fragments of these bearing dials have been recovered from Norse sites. Viking navigation knowledge was oral, memorized, passed from experienced navigator to apprentice over years of shared voyages. They described environmental cues, the smell of the air, the swell pattern, the specific quality of morning light at certain latitudes. The Viking navigator didn't need instruments because he was the instrument. Everything around him was data, an organic navigation computer. Now here is the part of the story that the sagas don't celebrate. The Viking navigation system was extraordinary. It was real, effective, and advanced centuries beyond what contemporary European sailors were using. All of that is true, but it failed. And when it failed completely. The sagas themselves give us the number. Buried in the casualty accounts and expedition records, historians spent centuries cross-referencing. Roughly 1 in 5 Norse Atlantic crossings ended in wreck, disappearance, or significant loss of life. 20%. On an ordinary trade run between Iceland and Greenland, 1 in 5 ships did not make it. The navigators who made it home were not the ones who never got lost. They were the ones who got lost and found their way back, the ones who read the swell wrong and recovered, The ones who ran out of bird sightings and held their bearing by feel alone. The ones who got lost and couldn't find their way back are not in the sagas. They are in the ocean. Think about what that number means in human terms. A longship carried between 20 and 40 men. A 20% loss rate means hundreds of men gone per decade. Not in battle, not in raids, just in transit. The families who stayed ashore knew this. Women who stood on the fjord edge watching ships leave understood the math. Their fathers had done it. Their sons would do it. And they said goodbye anyway. Because the alternative, staying on the wrong side of the ocean with no trade, no contact, no future, was worse. The Vikings didn't conquer the North Atlantic because they were fearless. They crossed it because the cost of not crossing was higher. In 1960, a Norwegian archaeologist named Helge Ingstad and his wife Anne Steen Ingstad traveled to the northern tip of Newfoundland. They had a theory that the Vinland described in the Norse sagas was not a myth, not a poetic exaggeration, but a real place. The local people in the small fishing village of Lanceau Meadows pointed them toward a series of strange grass-covered mounds. They had always assumed were natural formations. They weren't. Beneath those mounds was a Viking settlement. Carbon dated to approximately 1000 AD. 8 buildings, workshops, a forge for working iron, the first iron smelting ever documented in North America. The tools of daily Norse life, preserved under Newfoundland soil for 1,000 years. Leif Erikson had been here, or someone had. Someone who had crossed 3,000 miles of open ocean without a compass, without a map, without a single instrument we would recognize as navigational, and had found, with enough precision to establish a functioning settlement, a continent that Europe would not officially discover for another 5 centuries. The sunstone, the ravens, the whales, the stars, the feel of the current against a hand trailing in black water, the memorized voice of a father describing a cloud formation above the Greenland ice shelf. That system, that ancient, organic human system, worked. It brought men to a shore no European map had ever recorded. It built a settlement. It maintained trade routes for 400 years. And then it was lost, not destroyed, not defeated. Lost, the way things are lost when the people who carry them stop passing them on. The Greenland colonies collapsed around 1400 AD. The Atlantic crossing routes were abandoned. The navigators who knew the system died. Their apprentices died. And the knowledge that had crossed an ocean in the human mind simply ceased to exist. What we have now are fragments. The sagas, the crystal in the navigator's chest, the grass mounds in Newfoundland that a fishing community walked past for generations. But the ocean is still there. And on certain nights, when the star field reflects in the flat water between swells, it is possible to understand why someone would climb onto a 60-foot wooden ship and sail west into nothing. Not because they were certain they would make it, because they had the system, and the system had never failed them yet.